Dear Diary, today I decided to see if I could beat Fallout 4 with only the Knuckles, because they had the lowest DPS out of all the melee and unarmed weapons. I made my character, and as you can see, he's clearly been in a lot of fights in his life, and has won them all, mainly by blocking punches with his face. My name is irrelevant, and the special stats that I went for were not based around punching, strength of 4 to keep it challenging, and also look at him. Does he look too strong? I also put the difficulty up to normal to have an extra bit of challenge for this run. Plus, that's a difficulty that I assume most people play on. I braced my imposing frame for the bombs, got frozen, and watched my dreams come true. After getting out of the freezer, I locked the roaches safely behind doors, picked up the Pip-Boy, and left the vault. The first order of business was to find some Knuckles. I tried Carla and Trudy, but none of them had Knuckles. This made me so angry that I wanted to punch them. But of course I couldn't since I didn't have any Knuckles. I did buy a suit from Trudy and spoke to someone called Ness who needed help taking care of some raiders. I then went back to Sanctuary, bought some glasses from Carla, and picked up a book that told me that I'm special. I put this point into Charisma to max out my powers of persuasion. It was now time to go to Covenant to look for Knuckles and do their quest. Penny didn't have any Knuckles, but she did have a cigarette sticking out of her hand. I then waited for 48 hours to allow the merchants to refresh their stock. Carla now had some Knuckles that I bought along with the helmet for added head protection because I didn't want to lose the few IQ points that I did have since my intelligence is at 1. At this point I decided to not use VATS for this run for an added challenge. I tried out my Knuckles on some mole rats and found out that it takes 1 or 2 punches to kill your standard mole rat and more than that for rabid ones. The raiders in the museum were mildly challenging, but I've managed to get through them without any significant problems. I got the power armor, jumped off the roof, and immediately got out of it because I guess Knuckles plus a power armor would make me too powerful. I sent the raiders to Sovngarde and ran as soon as I saw the Deathclaw. The idea was that I would hide while Preston shot the beast. However, Preston had a completely different idea because he stopped shooting after a few shots. In an attempt to get him to be more engaged, I went up to the balcony and punched him to the ground. This did not really help because the Deathclaw and he ignored each other completely. And Preston eventually got stuck somewhere in the middle of the buildings, so I guess I ignored him and moved on with my life. Back at Sanctuary, I modded my Knuckles to their final form, named him Logan, and became a knockoff version of Wolverine. A robot and his friends needed help with some ghouls, so I obliged and went to ArcChat with the robot for some easy XP. The scenes were quite challenging, so I helped out when I felt like it and watched Dance get burned to a crisp. I didn't check on him because it told me that it was an optional objective, but he got over it and we found what we were looking for. This gave me a level up that I put into Iron Fist. On the way to Diamond City, I watched a disagreement between two potentially fake humans and decided to kill them both just to be safe. This was surprisingly difficult, which was kind of worrying because my knuckles are maxed out and this is still very much early in the game. I ignored the fight of the century, entered Diamond City, and got a few jobs so that I could use my charisma to fleece them of their money. On the way to save Nick, I got a legendary pair of knuckles, but decided against using them for some reason. Not entirely sure why. Sprint attacks and bleed damage were really helpful against the Triggerman. I could have resolved the situation with Fatty peacefully, but decided against it because of how difficult he and his goons made my life during the dog meat run. Back in Diamond City, the odds of me getting the key from the mayor were higher than those of a bear shitting in the woods. The Sins and Fort Hagen were really annoying because of this two-hit combo that they do. The moment of truth finally arrived, and the fight with Kellogg went better than expected. Although I had to use 7 hits of Jet, Psycho, and Med-X to come out on top. I then wore his clothes, hopped on the Pridwin, and got a level up that I put into Bloody Mess. At this point, I attempted to fight the Behemoth and failed, but that was expected. Luckily, when I returned to save Preston, some Brotherhood Knights helped me out, but I made sure to get the final hit so that they can't take credit for bringing down the beast. I decided to get the locket for the Abenathis on the way to Ten Pines Bluff, and got to the satellite array pretty easily. The raiders at Corvega were harassing my soon-to-be unpaid employees, and I couldn't stand for that. I took a quick detour to help out Ness, who ended up double-crossing me, so I returned the favor and transitioned her and her buddies to the afterlife. I then took out the bossman at Corvega, and the other raiders thought that they were safe. They were so wrong about this because I ended the existence of every last one of them, except for one guy who I left alive so that he could tell the tales of my atrocities. On my way to Diamond City, I cleared out Hangman's Alley, talked to Nick, and made my way to Good Neighbor. I didn't want Hancock to have the pleasure of stabbing Finn for the millionth time, so I did the honors, spoke to Amari, and had to go to the Glowing Sea. For the first time, I couldn't use power armor in the Glowing Sea. That made me feel so vulnerable that I would rather go on a date with Bill Cosby. I got a hazmat suit instead, and ran as fast as I could because the suit has no armor, and I was being chased by a Deathclaw. Luckily, some ghouls stopped the Deathclaw for autographs, and he was not too pleased about that. He even followed me all the way to that one place where all the weirdos hang out. I can't remember what that's called. I finally found Virgil and was off to hunt a courser. The gunners were a 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty, except for one guy who had a missile launcher. He was much trickier to deal with. Let me put it this way: if taking on the regular gunners was like fighting a chimpanzee, taking on this guy was like fighting a chimpanzee with a missile launcher. The courser was no more difficult than Kellogg, and I even got the sweet combo as I decommissioned him. After having the chip decoded, I built a device in Sanctuary, went to the Institute, and punched my son to death for letting himself get kidnapped. Back on the surface, I went to the castle and thought that this would be relatively easy to take over. What followed was the most mentally draining 3 hours of my life, because all but one of the Minutemen died, and Preston was never the same after I punched him off that balcony. He refused to do anything, and I had to try and beat a legendary glow-in-the-dark Mirelurk all by myself. Eventually, the Minuteman fixed himself after one of the many times that I fast traveled back and forth between the Pridwen and the castle. This allowed him to kill the queen, as I crippled the glow stick, and eventually all was good. I then had to kill a sentry bot alongside an old woman. This was challenging, but after the Marlock fiasco, nothing could faze me anymore. I genuinely think that I lost the ability to feel emotions for a few hours after that. Preston then told me that the Institute was attacking the castle, so I went to put them in their place, and Preston was as helpful as ever. There was no way that I could punch my way through this, so I built some turrets and found out that broken turrets fix themselves if you fast travel away and come back. So I went to Sanctuary and got enough materials to build 15 turrets. This took some time, but eventually it worked out, and Sturgis had conveniently found a way into the Institute in the meantime. Once inside, I killed a few synths, ran for the most part, and relayed my unpaid employees in. I punched everyone in the main room, checked my son's computer to make sure he wasn't on any compromising websites, and planted the charge in the reactor. Finally, I teleported out of the Institute, watched it explode, and beat Fallout 4 using only Knuckles without VATS. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, leave me a like, subscribe, and all of that other fun stuff. But most importantly, leave me a comment and let me know what challenges you want to see in the future. With that being said, I'm gonna leave this video off right here and see you guys next time.